Welcome to Seminole Sidelines. Hope you had a great weekend. The Osceola back with you 12:30 Eastern Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Joined by Osceola senior writer Curt Weiler today. I'm Bob Ferrante. Been a fun weekend, been a really good weekend for Florida State football recruiting too. We'll get into that and more on today's show. I think we'll start with the spring showcase. Obviously was an entertaining afternoon, even though stats were not kept. Curt Weiler did a great job. You can check out his stats on the Osceola. He went back and logged every play, first half, second half. So if you are curious for all the inside numbers, that's all there. Okay, so I think let's go macro here. And Curt, you got a really good column about where Florida State is now compared to when Mike Norvell arrived December of 2019. Obviously a very abbreviated 3-practice spring of 2020. We've seen, I think, really steady incremental growth out of this program each year, each spring. Your column takes a look at this as a showcase years in the making. Talk a little bit about your story and your big picture thoughts about this spring.
Yeah, I mean, it is as close to kind of seeing everything you want to see from a spring game as we've seen in years. I mean, we've kind of gone through years of, oh, well, they only really have enough for one offensive line, or if they try and split in two, one is notably worse than the other. And they've gone through years of, I mean, it just the individual playmaking kind of not being enough and not having the depth that you need, really not just at offensive line, but across the roster and just in general. I mean, questions about a great deal of kind of things that you're seeing. And there weren't really questions coming out of Saturday. I mean, I think you feel better about pretty much everything. I mean, it's hard to find too many negatives. I'm sure if you look deep enough, I mean, there could be some, but the positives far overwhelm the negatives. I mean, it's a testament to the job that Mike Norvell and his staff have done rebuilding this program. I mean, I think whatever you thought this team could accomplish come the fall going into Saturday, I don't think Saturday changed that at all for you. If you thought they were maybe a playoff team, I think they look like they could be. If you thought they were the ACC favorite, I think they look like they could be. I haven't gone back to watch Clemson yet to kind of compare. You don't want to put too much stock in a spring game anyway, but no, it was I mean, I think it was a show. I mean, really, this whole spring has been a show. Last season wasn't a fluke by any means.
Yeah, I think this was a showcase of, again, competition and depth. We've seen it improve throughout the years. Again, I think we try to compare to a year ago where our position group's better, where our players better. I think we're seeing a ton of improvement in a year from the receivers, for example. We've seen improvement from the linebacker group as far as some depth is starting to build there. And why is that important? Well, you've got some redshirt seniors at the top of that linebacker depth chart, guys like Kalen DeLoach, Tatum Bethune. You need to start restocking the talent pool there. And obviously Blake Nicholson will arrive in the summer, and that's a guy that we'll get a chance to see. But I thought an Omar Graham, for example, really made the most of his 14 and now coming up later today, 15th practice for Florida State as they wrap up this afternoon. They'll be on the field at 4 p.m. So we'll have full coverage on the Osceola later tonight of the final practice. Defensive coaches will be talking. So if you're kind of curious about what they're thinking, what they're saying, good opportunity for us to talk to the defensive coaches. Curt, I thought our guy, Kentron Poitier, I call him our guy because we were talking about him just about every practice as we were watching, whether it was on the field in the early portions of the practice or when we're watching him from up top at the baseball stadium. I think Kentron made a really good play or a very, very nice one-handed circus catch just about every practice. The one on Saturday was up there. It was fantastic. I mean, if Florida State wants to put together a highlight reel of maybe his top catches, I'm all for it. Let's see it because I think the fans would love to see it. Kentron would be one of my offensive stars of the spring. Do you have one, Kentron or somebody else?
Well, I think Kentron is, to me, the star of the spring. I mean, I was glad to see the Kentron we saw for most of the spring show up Saturday, because we've definitely built him up. It would have been frustrating to a little if you build him up and then the spring game, maybe he doesn't perform, he has a few drops, or he struggles to get open, or who knows what. I mean, he did all of the above and made some really nice plays, had the touchdown from Jordan Travis. I know we saw that a few times last year. Imagine we could very well see it a few more. I mean, I think he's a guy who's probably positioned himself at that wide receiver 2 spot in the starting lineup opposite Johnny Wilson. And I know people made I think, a mountain out of a molehill about Johnny Wilson not being out there. I just would urge people not to worry too much. But yeah, other guys. I mean, I think honestly, a guy who I think offensive line's not where you're looking first in that exhibition. It's not the sexiest position by any means, but I think Bless Harris coming back from injury, I was really impressed with him holding down the left tackle spot pretty much all spring and really impressing. I mean, they threw a lot at him and in one-on-ones, in team settings, and he handled a lot of it really well. I think, I mean, it's entirely possible that would have been Bless's spot all last year if he hadn't got hurt in that Duquesne game and missed the rest of the year. But he is back, and I think is kind of picking up right where he left off. I've liked what I've seen from him.
Yeah, some other guys who were impressive, they just come to mind. Jeremiah Byers, obviously, I think was one of the most beyond Bless. I think Jeremiah's up there 1 and 1A in some order, however you might look at it. Vandrevius Jacobs was probably the most impressive true freshman. If you're kind of trying to think about those guys who early enrolled, yes, Brock Glenn had a really, really good spring, didn't exactly show it as well, I think, on Saturday in the showcase. There were not moments that I think affirmed what we saw in a number of practices, but those were some big moments for him inside the stadium. I thought CJ Campbell had that really tough physical touchdown run. I think when they started the drive at the 12-yard line, he pushed a couple of the first team defenders backwards. So instead of giving in, again, this is a walk-on, a guy who's truly earned his reps and his opportunities. Good to see CJ make some plays. Okay, defensive star of the showcase, Kalen DeLoach feels like a great choice because he had 2 takeaways. But Curt, thinking about the showcase in the spring, who would be your defensive stars?
I think when you're looking at the showcase, I agree. I think it is Kalen DeLoach. I mean, he probably had 2 touchdowns if that's a live game. I think it would have been a pick 6, and the fumble he recovered, I think, definitely would have been a touchdown if they kind of weren't blowing those dead just because of the rules or whatnot. Looking at the spring as a whole, I mean, there are quite a few candidates. I almost don't want to give it to, I mean, I think Jared Verse looked great. Fabian Lovett looked great. Like, you don't want to give it to someone who kind of you expected greatness from. I think I might give it to Josh Farmer. I mean, he's a guy who just day in and day out, I think, really impressed me. And I mean, I've talked about obviously his old high school teammate, Daryl Jackson, who has been impressive as well. But I think Josh almost kind of wanted to make sure he didn't get lost in the shuffle, and I think did just that. I mean, I think he is one of the guys who impressed me the most this spring, to be sure, just with, I mean, how impactful he was on a pretty consistent basis.
I had a feeling you were going to go with one of the 2 Gadsden boys, so I'm with you. Either Josh or Daryl Jackson, both were really good. I think, again, looking at a younger player, Omar Graham, a younger guy who really stood out. I thought of the early enrollees, Kirkland, I think Kenton Kirkland probably had one of the better springs, at least on the early start of it. I'm trying to think. Quindarius had a pass breakup and I think a late interception in the showcase. Is that right?
Yeah, he had the interception of Duffy. I think right when I was leaving the press box to go down to post game, he had the interception. But honestly, that was a lot of his spring. I mean, he had a lot of pass breakups. I remember the one day they practiced in Doak, I think the last play was like a throw in like a goal line situation to Johnny Wilson, and Quindarius broke it up, and I think got like a big ovation from his defensive teammates. He's battled this spring, and I know Adam Fuller talked him up a good bit yesterday about like how far he came from after a good tour of duty, how far he came from kind of practice 1 where he looked like a freshman to I think practice 13, 14 where he really didn't. And I think he surprised some people because I remember, I mean, after that first scrimmage, I remember Adam talking about kind of like Quindarius, maybe more the guy who needs to redshirt for a year and then makes an impact like Shaheem Brown. Well, maybe that's not true after the spring he had. I mean, who knows? Maybe he has some kind of role like Azaria Thomas did last year as a true freshman.
Yeah, so lots to like this spring. Again, the competition and depth was out there, and we'll have more from Florida State's 15th practice again, 4 p.m. when they hit the field. Around 6:30, 7 o'clock, we'll be getting interviews, uploading videos, and Kurt will have his observations from the final practice. Again, the defensive position coaches will be talking tonight, so check out our YouTube channel. We've grown that YouTube channel, and we appreciate you all for liking, subscribing, watching the videos. Hope you're enjoying all of those from football and recruiting to all the various sports. If you're not a subscriber, please jump in. It helps us out just to grow this channel. We'll be able to bring you more and more great interviews, whether it's just the basic ones after practice or some of the guests that we want to book on Seminole Sidelines and on other shows down the road. So you can also check out the Billy Sexton video from Sunday night. We'll talk a little bit about that toward the end of the show. But I think, Kurt, let's talk a little bit about recruiting, because we had a pretty big commitment on Saturday with BJ Gibson, a 4-star athlete from Georgia. He can play offense, he can play defense, he can play baseball. And I think it was very, very important to him. You can see that quote scrolling at the bottom there. He wanted to play baseball and football in college. Very interested in Tennessee to begin with, but now I think very, very interested in what he can do for Florida State. This is a very stacked wide receiver group. If that's what he is, he could be a DB if that's what they choose him to be. But a good get for Florida State to bring BJ Gibson to campus.
I mean, if you're Florida State right now, you've got to be in the position of, acquiring talent, and you figure out later kind of how the dominoes fall of who plays where. Just get them signed, get them enrolled, and then figure it out. Because I think they doubled there. They had 2 4-star receiver commits coming into the week in Tawaski Adams and Camden Fryer, and then add Luane McCoy on Thursday while he's visiting, and then add BJ Gibson on Saturday. And they have 4-star receivers now. And I know, they're in on quite a few others. James Madison II was here for the spring game, and I know Florida State's in good position with him. A lot of time in the recruitment left, obviously. He could carry it all the way to December or February, but you feel good about where Florida State is there right now. And we'll talk about, just in general, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they've been recruiting out of their minds from a skill position. Town, maybe you just change the graphic up. That was pretty big news this weekend. Those 2 on consecutive days. It felt coordinated around this weekend a little bit by them. Maybe FSU kind of trying to set those up. But Luke Kromenhoek, on Friday, announced he was shutting down his recruitment and locked in on Florida State, which is, I think, a big deal because he was a guy who Florida State got in on before he was ranked, before he was starting for his high school. He was behind a guy who signed with Auburn at Benedictine Military Academy up in Savannah. And then Cam Davis, another South Georgia kid, the number 1 running back in the class, has been committed for 2 years. Georgia's been pushing hard. Florida's been pushing hard. A lot of people have been pushing hard. He's a really good prospect. And he shut down Saturday, I think, put out the graphic right as he was arriving for his visit. And he'd hinted at that not that long ago. But, it's a big deal to have those 2 kind of locked up. And, yes, I understand, quote unquote, things are never locked up until kind of you get the signature. I get that. But both these 2, they've taken visits elsewhere, but it's never felt especially threatening. And it's always felt like they've kept the Florida State staff in the loop, which I always feel is a big deal with visits, where it's not catching them off guard of, oh, so-and-so's at Penn State or stopping by Florida or wherever. And it's big for Florida State. It's another quarterback for that competition next year that should be pretty fascinating to watch. And Cam Davis is a physical specimen that I think is a guy who could come in and make an impact right away, to be sure.
If you have not seen Cam Davis in person, you are missing out. I think the photos do him some justice. He does not look like your traditional high school rising senior running back. This guy is very well built, and
2% body fat percentage. What are we guessing? He is just like a wall of muscle, and that's what you want for your running back. I would not want to tackle him. I know that much.
Yeah, Cam. I think shutting down your recruitment is now code for I'm committed. I've taken my visits to everywhere that I'm slightly curious about. Like Luke went to Penn State. I think he think you want a prospect to take the visits everywhere that you're at least curious about, and then leave no doubt, and then say, I've left no doubt behind. I'm
Yeah.
committed to Florida State. I'm shutting it down. I think this is maybe the 2023 version of recruitment. A lot of people would say, well, if you're committed, why are you looking elsewhere? I think part of it is just to reinforce to yourself and then to others in your class, to the coaching staffs, of what your decision truly is. So shutting down is a little bit awkward, but I think this is the reality of where we are in recruiting these days. Um, Shifting gears on recruiting, we'll hit on a couple other topics here. Patrick Burnham was up at the Atlanta Rivals camp on Sunday. He's got a lot of observations from the day, OL versus DL one-on-ones. Um, some good interviews there too on our Osceola YouTube channel. You can check those out. We've also posted them on the site on our recruiting board. So you can watch all those. They're really short video interviews, just catching up with various guys from 24 class, 25 class, even some 26 guys. I know Pat said he was really impressed by some of the edge rushers. So some young guys to watch there, from that Rivals camp in Atlanta. All right, so the big news that could be coming, whether it's today or down the road, Landon Thomas, the Georgia commit from Moultrie, Georgia. Again, he was a one-time Florida State commit, backed off, committed to Georgia. Now, spring games for Florida State and Georgia were both on Saturday. Where was Landon Thomas? He was in Tallahassee. Very, very interesting developments. We'll see where this goes. This would be a massive, obviously, anytime you get a 5-star, massive get. I think it also says something about how far Florida State has come as far as the vision that Mike Norvell has shown. It's not just show me, it's you've shown prospects by winning 10 games. You've shown them with how you've practiced day in and day out, how you develop talent. Landon Thomas might be buying into that. And look, he's going to do great at Georgia. He's going to do great at Florida State. Obviously, he's thinking about things in his actions. We'll see what his words are and what comes next. I'll be very curious to see what happens with Landon Thomas. Curt, do you have any thoughts on what could be next for here?
Yeah, I mean, I think no doubt a guy who is committed somewhere and chooses to go to a different school on junior day, or not junior day, on for the spring game, which is always kind of a big visit weekend, speaks. I mean, that guy becomes on flip watch. He is absolutely in that realm. I mean, he's a guy who liked Florida State originally, was an early kind of guy who bought in early on Norvell and his staff and Chris Thompson, the tight ends coach, before his stock really blew up. I think he committed kind of at the end of his freshman year and then had a huge sophomore year, and about halfway through there backed off and ended up, becoming the prospect he did and wanted to go to a Georgia. And now that Florida State's kind of back in the sphere of relevance, that they're a ACC contender, a college football playoff contender, I think this is the type of guy who is going to pick up the phone for you again, who's going to consider. He always liked Florida State. It didn't feel like it was a backing off because of not liking them. It felt like, I might be a bigger prospect than where Florida State is right now. And that's, some guys are obviously going to buy in when things aren't going well, but it's understandable if a 4 or 5-star kind of highly rated kid doesn't want to commit to or play for a team that's not having the most success. It's totally understandable. So I think, he is absolutely on flip watch coming out of that weekend. I think they always say follow the visits, and if you're following the visits, things are trending one way right now.
Yeah, trending in a good direction for sure. We'll see how that develops.
It was his third time, I think, on campus since January, and second this month,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I couldn't remember what it was, but again, if you get somebody on campus this many times, it's telling you a lot. I think Fish says you want to get a guy on campus 3 times. Look, he's clearly weighing it and thinking about it. We'll see how it develops and what happens next. So again, coming up tonight, football practice coverage. Coming up Wednesday on the show, we'll do a full spring football breakdown. We'll get Patrick Burnham, Jerry Cutts, Curt, myself. We'll kind of get the full crew in. We can kind of dive in deeper on spring practices, what we liked, what we didn't like. I'll be curious if we debate what position groups we thought maybe took the biggest step forward. I think that's a good topic to evaluate Again, when you saw the receivers take a huge step forward in 2022, which ones do we think took the biggest step forward this spring? Okay, well, to wrap up, fun night Sunday night. Thanks to our friends at Glory Days and everybody who put together the event. Jerry Cutts organizing along with his friend Bob Fry. We thank both of them for putting together really an all-star event. Gene Deckerhoff, thank you for grabbing the mic one more time for us and playing the MC very, very well. Sammy Smith and William Floyd, great stories from those guys. It was a fun night, I think, to honor somebody who's meant, Coach Sexton has meant so much for this program. Played at Florida State, middle 1970s, jumped on Coach Bowden's staff as a grad assistant, and really was there for decades. So great to see Billy. I know he's been through a rough time, but for his family, I think to feel that kind of support from the FSU community, emotionally, financially, it was a big night for them. There were a lot of smiles, a few tears, but a lot of smiles all around. Fun night. We've got the full video. It's a little bit long, obviously, on our YouTube, so we'll be cutting down some things in the coming days.
I think the proper program starts around 45 minutes in, I think is what somebody said. So if you want to kind of find where the proper, I think Gene's kind of filling time before then, as he does so well, and that's entertaining in its own right. But if you're kind of focused in the meat of it, I think it starts around 45 minutes in.
So yeah, jump in and take a look at that video. I promise you're going to hear some stories. Maybe you've heard a couple of them, but William Floyd had a bunch of people laughing at a lot of it. Sammy Smith, you can tell a lot of love there too. So good memories, good comments from those guys. And also should mention Arya Masudi was among those walking around last night, grabbing some players, some guys, Kurt Unglob, Keith Jones, guys who have known Billy Sexton for years. They'll be sharing stories in a video that Arya is going to edit and we'll have posted on the site in the coming days. So much more to come from that Billy Sexton event. But on our message board, on our Twitter, you can check out some of those photos of the folks who showed up and wanted to support Coach Sexton. Again, shout out to Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell was able to make an appearance and say hello to a bunch of people and lend his support. So a great fun night. I think a lot of the guys are still out there playing golf as we're talking right now. So hopefully they're enjoying the golf over at Seminole Legacy this afternoon. All right. Well, a little bit of a quick show for you. We wanted to hit on a lot of bases there and promise you that we've got much more coming on the site later today, Tuesday, and then a bigger show, more expansive spring breakdown coming Wednesday. So again, check us out, 12:30 p.m. Wednesday, Osceola, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Again, thanks to everybody who is watching. If you have subscribed, again, appreciate that so much. If you can, tell a friend, tell a Florida State friend that what we're doing with the Osceola, what we're doing with Seminole Sidelines, and we'll get all the guys gathered for Wednesday for a big show. We appreciate you all watching. We're going to wrap it up here. We appreciate Curt Weiler, as always, for joining us. I'm Bob Ferrante. Have a good Monday. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.